Hey guys, Cody here with Import Image Racing. Thanks for checking out today's video. I know a lot of people were really anticipating the launch of the 2022 WRX and the STI. Unfortunately, the STI was postponed, so right now all the excitement is on the WRX. Some people hate it, some people love it. We're not here to discuss that today. So we're completely disregarding the outside of the car. We're gonna talk about some of the mechanical features that have changed. So after dissecting this a little bit the other day, I just kind of wanted to give you guys a little video showing my findings and some of the things that we discovered on this thing that are completely different from the V8 chassis. So a lot of people that were into the 15 to 21 WRX know that, oh, well, the catback looks similar and, oh, it's a FA24, which should just bolt on FA20 parts, and a lot of us thought the same things, but that is not the case whatsoever. So we are going to dive into that a little bit here, just kind of give you guys an idea of what all has changed. So one of the first things that people usually modify as soon as a car is released is the suspension. So everyone's asking, is it the same suspension? And it's quite different. This is now on the global platform, and things have changed up quite a bit. We actually have a coilover on here now, which is a prototype because the V8 chassis didn't fit, and we're gonna kind of have to do a redesign on that. Obviously, for the most part, the suspension's set up similarly. Everything is sort of, using the same type of control arms, the same sway bars, that sort of thing. They're mounted at different places. So like the rear sway bar, I do want to test it later on, maybe this week or something. Looks to be the exact same shape sway bar that is in the V8 chassis. However, it is no longer mounted basically to the back of the frame. It's mounted upwards. So a lot of things have changed on the suspension. We have only done so much testing so far. So, once White Line announces, oh, these will fit, or, oh, no, these don't fit, we're going to redesign. Whichever company you prefer, that's going to be the best bet. I would not go buying parts for this right away and assuming that they're going to fit, because we're finding that a lot of the stuff doesn't fit. There's going to be a lot of testing going on in the next couple weeks with everyone having this car now. Wait till you get that verification before you go and buy the part. But anyways, let's move on. All right, moving on to the main attraction, the new FA24 engine. Subaru originally released this and installed it into the new Ascent. And a lot of people had speculation that maybe it was intended for another vehicle and that they were just kind of testing it out in the Ascent. That's exactly what they did, I believe. They put the FA24 in the Ascent. They were like, okay, we're gonna test this thing out, see how it goes, and then we'll see, what we can do with it. It's a 2.4 liter now instead of a 2.0 liter. The connecting rods are said to be about twice as thick. The cylinder walls are more thick. The cylinder walls have more support. The heads are supposed to be a little bit more free-flowing. They have beehive-shaped valve springs, so eliminating valve float and things like that. So this is supposedly going to be a much tougher engine. I don't know if you guys know who Prime Motoring is, but they had an FA24 swapped Crosstrek that they were working on, and they hit just over 550 wheel horsepower on it before they saw a failure. And when they saw a failure, it was because of the direct injection reaching its limitations. So at that point, you would have to switch to like a port injection. It melted the piston. It didn't bend a rod. It didn't put a hole in the block. So this thing is probably going to be pretty tough. So what changed? Will the FA20 parts bolt onto this? I'm here to tell you, unfortunately, no. A lot of the parts are different, and the nice thing is a lot of manufacturers already have this motor and they're already working on stuff long before this car was released. We may be seeing parts a little bit sooner than what people might think, but let's talk about some of the differences. So obviously the intercooler is different. This looks like it would be the STI intercooler based on its shape and size. However, this is still a little bit smaller than the STI intercooler, and obviously it has plastic end tanks instead of, fully metal like the STI one. The intake manifold is quite different than the FA20 as well. You got a different throttle body at a different location. The AC lines are ran differently. We have a completely new charge pipe design. It's kind of going underneath the intercooler, and it's hard to tell. It might be a 2-inch diameter, but one of the things that is interesting to me is they put all this foam insulation on the charge pipe. So I'm not sure if that's to keep down on turbo noise or if that's to try and keep heat out or what their intention was with that, but that's completely new. And you have these big bulky plastics holding this foam on all around the charge pipe. Fueling, the FA20 had fuel coming from the driver's side of the vehicle out to the high pressure fuel pump, and this one has the fuel lines coming out from the passenger side. So I'm not entirely sure yet how the fueling is set up. I haven't really got that far into it, but I'm sure it's quite a bit different than the FA20. So there may be a specific reason for that. It looks like we still do have the standard TGVs that were in the FA20 probably got the same EGR and stuff like that. A couple more things to note. The intake looks a little bit different. I think the MAF sensor is the same size, so we may be able to reuse intakes from the previous generation that use a different snorkel, because the snorkel is shaped differently. We have a new fuse box over here. Basically, it just has a couple relays in it. Not exactly sure, why they had to include this, but it basically has wiper relay, de-icer, AC, fog light relay. Another thing that's different is the struts are different. The studs on the struts are different, so the coilovers are different, and for that reason, you will not be able to use most strut bars. I'm not sure about clearance, but I know that most strut bars are not going to go down over these studs because they were designed for the smaller studs on the FA20. It does look like our high pressure fuel pump is still located over here, even though the fuel lines are coming from that side. It is interesting to note that the ECU is now located on the driver's side instead of the passenger side. So this used to actually be over here on this side, tucked in over here beside the charge pipe, and now that is located over here. It looks like the pitch stop in the back may have a little bit more support than we had on the FA20. Clutch lines and the brake lines look slightly different than the FA20 as well, so I'm sure there's quite a few differences there. The ABS system looks exactly the same. Looks like it's probably the same alternator. The AC compressor actually looks slightly different. There's no longer that vacuum pump that was over here on the FA20. Instead, we have some electronic plugs that may be a sensor for the EGR or something. Something even as simple as the engine caps are slightly different. FA20 WRX, we made some 3D printed engine bay caps to cover up all these yellow caps, and they don't even fit on this one. So they changed up even like the washer reservoir, the coolant reservoir. The caps look the same, but they're different sizes. So now I'm going to slide under the car with you guys, show you some of the things that changed under the car, because it's actually a little bit more than you may expect. So first things first, that entire splash guard is different. That skid plate is completely different. And when we start dissecting this thing, you're going to find that there's a pattern going on here. So right here is your downpipe. On the FA20, you'd have your cat here, you'd have your 202 sensors, your ground strap, and then you'd have a secondary cat and then your resonator. Now this one is set up the same way. We have our same 202 sensors, we have the same ground strap, we have the catalytic converter in the front, and we have the secondary catalytic converter down there. One big thing you'll notice is it is still a two-piece design as before, but it's actually a little bit longer than the previous one. And you'll see that now it goes up and over this new subframe that they put in. Now the main thing that's gonna make it so that you can't install your FA20 downpipe is the flange. The problem is, this is now a 3-bolt flange. So we have obviously a bolt here, bolt up top, but then where's the other bottom bolt? It's right there. So it is a triangular shaped flange with 3 bolts on it. So one there, and one up top. So now we are facing forward to the front of the car and looking at the oil pan. The oil pan itself looks different, which it should be, being 2.4 liter. So the oil pan looks definitely different. The headers themselves also switched from a 4-bolt flange to a 3-bolt flange. So now we have a bolt there, bolt there, bolt there. An interesting thing to note on the downpipe connection and the header connection, it looks like Subaru is still using the exact same crappy freaking studs as before. You can see we literally have actually I don't even think we broke 100 miles on this thing yet, and look how bad those studs already look. The bolts look like they're almost rounded from the factory, and we haven't touched any of this. Look at that bolt there. Maybe Subaru had issues with them jacking up the car using the turbo sump, and so they stamped a little do not jack sign on the turbo sump. Small little detail that'll save people a couple $100 when they, jack their car up on that. It'll smash it and you'll need a new one. And this sump itself looks quite different. Now you're about to see something that you typically won't see Subaru do. Subaru discovered that there was a problem and that they needed to fix it, and they actually fixed it. We now have a metal turbo inlet. So they got rid of the crappy plastic ones that are breaking, and we got a metal one. However, there is now coolant running to the metal inlet. I'm sure there's some benefits and there's some drawbacks. Now I'm sure people in hotter climates can just get a little connector, connect the two hoses, and plug off the inlet. So now we have under here what's listed as an MGT 22 Garrett turbo, and the previous generation WRX and the Forester and all those had an MGT 22 turbo as well. The compressor housing here looks slightly different, and so people are speculating that this may have a larger compressor wheel or something. So the FA24 is making more power than the FA20, and it is pushing a lot less boost. So the FA24 is peaking around 12 pounds of boost, holding, you know, between like 10 and 11, and the FA20 was peaking at 21, 22 pounds of boost and holding it around 16 to 17 on a hotter day. And so that's interesting. I guess time will tell. I'm sure maybe somebody already knows, but as far as us, we are not completely sure yet. So another big thing to mention on this turbo, when you start to look up to where the wastegate actuator would be and the giant bypass valve would be, you see that they are not here because, well, they are electronic now. So we have the electronic wastegate actuator here and the electronic bypass valve up there. Now this may seem like a headache, but this is actually probably a good thing for tuning solutions where you'll have better control of the wastegate and bypass valve. So that's pretty cool actually. So now sliding further under the car behind the front axle here, you can see a little bit more of the backside of this FA24. You can see the charge pipe where it goes into the intercooler. You can see some of the coolant lines ran. You can see what appears to be the EGR valve there. So just another angle for you. So we have this new engine that's capable of a lot more power. We have this new chassis that handles so much better. And what do we have for a transmission? Well, we got the exact same split case transmission that came out of every WRX since, what, 2002 basically. So 6-speed, split case, same one that was in the V8 chassis. I'm willing to bet this transmission mount is exactly the same too as it appears to be. So it'll probably utilize the exact same transmission mount. The whole subframe for the transmission looks exactly the same. It'll probably be utilizing the same exact shifter plate, shifter bushings, all of that stuff, which would be a nice thing because some of that will transfer over. But when you start pushing power and you blow third gear out of your transmission or you blow a giant hole in the bottom of it, it's not going to be a fun time. Up top here above the drive shaft and this giant heat shield, that appears to be the exact same shifter box that would contain the shifter linkage and everything as the previous generation. So I'm speculating that the short shifters and stuff might fit from the V8 chassis, but we have not confirmed it yet. And of course we have the exact same two-piece drive shaft with the carrier here in the middle. So we slide to the rear end of the car and the rear differential carrier looks exactly the same. The rear subframe where the rear diff basically bolts in looks exactly the same, and the rear differential itself looks exactly the same. So the rear sway bar, I believe, used to be bolted to the rear frame here, and now it's actually bolted up to this top subframe. And so I'm not sure if rear sway bars will fit or anything like that just yet, but it looks like the control arms are exactly the same, you know, same end links, quite a few things carried over. So interestingly enough, on the 2022 WRX, we still have the giant spare tire well, and we no longer have a spare tire, much like other vehicles now on the market, and we have this nice fancy fix-a-flat kit. Not exactly sure what weight we're saving here because this giant piece of foam and that fix-a-flat kit weighs probably the same as a spare tire would. One more thing that I really want to show you guys as a bonus before we end today's video. Take a quick look at this center console and tell me if you see anything a little familiar maybe. Come out here to my 2020 WRX. Okay. Well guys, that's going to be it for today's video. Hopefully this was helpful for you and hopefully you enjoyed. Let us know what you guys think of this. You know, do you think that this thing was built for something more? Do you think when the STI finally does come out that they're going to squeeze a little bit more power out of this thing? And what's up with that center diff control fitting right into place? So a lot of things to dissect here, guys. We'll see you in the next video. Until then, take care.